Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 371. Profits from Disaster and breaks through a third time. The majority of the aura entered through the pores and gushed out from Jun Moxie's feet. It then disappeared without a trace. It seemed as if the aura was only passing through his body. However, the aura continued to cleanse his already clean body iteration after iteration. In fact, it seemed to be striving for perfection in that regard. Therefore, not even the slightest of impurity had remained after some time. However, Jun Moxie hadn't realized this. And that was because he was immersed in excruciating pain this entire time. Jun Moxie had used the flame of primal chaos, but he hadn't anticipated that its unexpected devil's bite would entail the kind of pain that no living man could endure even 1% of. In fact, it could be said that this was the most excruciating of all pain that existed. Young Master Jun wouldn't have been able to endure this pain if it weren't for his enhanced state of mind, and if he hadn't initiated the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune, or if the aura wasn't nourishing his body. Jun Moxie would have died if any one of these things had been amiss. His soul would have scattered away, and he would have never attained peace if that were to happen. It was the devil's bite of the flame of primal chaos. How could it be weak? There's an old saying, good and bad fortunes are interdependent. And these words have never been false. This was because a person could reach a level which ordinary people can't if they are able to endure pain which the latter couldn't. Consequently, they would benefit from advantages which an ordinary person wouldn't even be able to imagine. One has to pay the corresponding price if they wish for some advantages. However, one is reborn and reaches a new level after one pays the price with their conduct. In fact, no entity in this world is an exception to this rule. One's sorrows would eventually turn to joy if they endure extreme pain and suffering through hard will. Jun Moxie had initiated the flame of primal chaos. So, he was dealing with its devil's bite at present. But he had stuck to his will in order to survive it. However, the reward he'd attain after such an exceptionally enormous punishment would also be exceptionally great. That grim punishment was the most severe test. And it was a very feasible price to pay. One aspect of this pain attributed to hell, but the other corresponded to heaven. Why else would the insignificant second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda possess the flame of primal chaos? Everything has its purpose. Every obstacle on the road to the top has its reason. Everything has its own usefulness. Jun Moxie's body had been cleansed to its very essence when his body had obtained the Hongjun Pagoda. It had become brand new at that time. Therefore, his physique was far better than that of an ordinary person. But he was still in the category of a mortal. However, his body changed in its entirety as he underwent this thorough cleansing process. One could attempt to draw an analogy to explain this better. Jun Moxie's body had been like a trashy bag of meat when he had passed through to this world. But his body had become a skilled one after he had received the Hongjun Pagoda. It had become outstanding, but it was still within the scope and cognition of many people. That means, it was within the range of human understanding. And thus, their ability to scale. However, Jun Moxie's shell couldn't be described as a body anymore. It would be a bit of an exaggeration to say that the young Master Jun's body was now like that of the enlightened Tang dynasty monk who had journeyed to the west to learn the Buddhist scriptures. That monk's body was obviously made of flesh. The above explanation wasn't given to show that the young master's physique was equal to that of the monk's. Rather, the young master had emerged stronger in comparison. The monk's body had obviously accumulated far more aura than an ordinary person could imagine. The young master's body had also accumulated a terrifying quantity of aura. However, the inner quality of his body had also far transcended that of an ordinary person's. And this would hold true whether one could discuss in terms of temperament or the spirit. His physique had been strengthened. His meridians flowed unimpeded. And the aura flowed dense throughout his body, and even through his internal organs. And that was because this transformation had changed him into something entirely new. The young master's previous speed of cultivation was already enough to be labeled as abnormal. But his speed would probably become several times faster after these events. Moreover, there would be no possibility of an accidental devil's bite on his journey further. This was because there was no chance of a devil's bite after this. The meridians of his entire body had been widened further. In fact, they had been widened to the very limit the meridians of a human body could have been. Therefore, Jun Moxie's further practice would only be a process of accumulation. That's all. For example, the capacity of an average person's dantian was equal to that of a well. But Jun Moxie's capacity had become equal to that of a lake. However, there was very little water in that lake at present. However, the misty waters of this lake could stretch beyond the horizon once it had been filled. But this would obviously happen after a long process of accumulation. Jun Moxie had recovered after a day and a night's time. Some fear still lingered in Jun Moxie's heart as he slowly opened his eyes. He had felt as if the 18 layers had simultaneously opened themselves up for him during that ordeal. And this feeling had left even the fearless evil monarch's heart to tremble. It hurts very badly. He tried to move his finger, but found himself to be completely helpless. He felt like every muscle in his body had seemingly been turned into cotton. He had no strength left in his body, except for the amount he'd need to pant. This was similar to a person feeling that their entire body was functioning normally, but they had still been paralyzed for some mysterious reason. Jun Moxie panted as he exerted a great effort to slowly initiate the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. He then focused and cycled his qi. However, he suddenly opened his eyes wide in astonishment. This is unreal. A cycle of the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune required few breaths' time to work inside his body. However, it had happened in a blink of an eye this time. He had thought about the idea, and had nearly initiated it, but the entire thing had already cycled through his meridians, and had returned to his dantian. It had happened at a lightning speed. The greatest advantage to that lightning speed of movement was that he'd never have to be worried about his xian qi not being enough. Moreover, he'd never have to worry about running out of it. That is to say that Jun Moxie could fight endlessly if he so desired. In fact, he could fight forever. As long as he didn't starve, or an extremely powerful expert didn't cut off his head. What does this mean? Jun Moxie was already a genius. But this meant that he had now transformed into an inexplicable monster. Jun Moxie was ecstatic. He couldn't understand everything at this time, but he still knew that he had been fundamentally reborn. And so, he contained his excitement with difficulty. Then, Jun Moxie initiated the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune since he still hadn't regained any control over his body. And he wanted to break away from that state of affairs. After all, what use would his remarkable physique be if he remained paralyzed? Fortunately, his strength to gain control over his body also started to increase with each cycle of his xian qi. And he felt a comfortable sensation every time his xian qi cycled through his body. His practice had now become pleasurable, not painful or difficult. Jun Moxie's excitement rose each time his strength increased. His xian qi had cycled 72 times by this point. It stopped cycling after that, and Jun Moxie suddenly felt a surge of explosive power throughout his body. In fact, he felt that he could destroy anything as long as he wished to. Jun Moxie straightened his back and slowly got up. Then, he stretched his legs. He was about to cut off his connection with his Xian efficacy when his Xian qi was set into motion. And it had been set into movement without the aid of any cheats either. The Hongjun Pagoda's aura stormed out with a violent blue light and vanished into nothingness. Dang! Jun Moxie's posterior touched the ground. He had spiraled into a state of absolute shock. Mother! What could that blue light possibly be? I'm going crazy. I was at the Jade Xian peak before this flame devastated my body. So, how am I at the initial level of Sky Xian realm? Even sitting on a cultivation rocket couldn't have advanced my level this fast, right? This great surprise had been an accident in reality. He stared blankly for a long time before he was able to come back to himself. Jun Moxie half believed he was dreaming. So, he waved his hand. And a blue light emanated from it. Moreover, it was a bright light blue in color. This is definitely Sky Xian realm's initial level. But how is this possible? Don't tell me that using the flame of primal chaos has produced such a great effect. The young Master Jun couldn't help but be immensely pleased with himself. In fact, he had even forgotten about how terror-stricken he had been a while ago. One must know that the flame of primal chaos was the best flame for concocting pills. Moreover, it was also the origin of the fires of the world. And it was the most destructive flame. No other flame in this world could surpass it. The flame of primal chaos existed inside the Hongjun Pagoda. And the Hongjun Pagoda existed inside Jun Moxie's consciousness. So, he would have to transfer it from the Hongjun Pagoda if he wished to use it. In other words, the young Master Jun would have to transfer it into his conscience from the Hongjun Pagoda. And, as everyone knows, one's conscience resides in one's mind, not in one's posterior. It must be known that extracting such a dangerous entity into one's mind, and then allowing it pass through one's meridians could have easily caused extensive damage. In fact, it was even riskier than walking on a tightrope 10,000 feet above the ground. Jun Moxie knew that he was taking a risk when he had begun to use it. However, he hadn't expected the danger and difficulty to be that immense. It was only due to the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune that he was successfully able to extract it. And it was with the help of the Hongjun Pagoda and the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune that he was able to safeguard his fragile meridians. Else, he would have died on the spot. He had been extremely lucky. Each and every condition had been indispensable. It must be said that he was ignorant and had experienced such a terrible situation thereof. But his luck had also been unrivaled in this instance. It was as if a poor beggar had gone off to a desolate area in order to defecate. Then, he had extended his hand to grab a piece of stone in the hope of using it as a replacement for toilet paper. However, he had suddenly discovered a giant heap of gold instead of dog **T around him. The young Master Jun's situation was similar to that person's, lucky. Jun Moxie was flabbergasted. He had just met with an accident. But he had also reached the initial level of the Sky Xian realm. And this fact was undeniable. A 17-year-old Sky Xian expert. His cultivation had reached the Sky Xian realm in 4 months. He was a mere level 3 Xian practitioner 4 months ago. But he had become a Sky Xian expert in 4 months. His speed was so frightful that it was almost like sitting on a rocket and shooting up. Jun Moxie was overjoyed. Then, he suddenly remembered. My Xian cultivation has taken such an astonishing jump. What about the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune? What level would the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune have advanced to? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 372. Breaking through to the third level. Ah, this is great. Jun Moxie took a deep breath as he muttered. He was brimming with energy. He somersaulted and roared loudly in an unrestrained manner to give vent to his excitement. Then, he steadied his excited state of mind and operated the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. One must vent their feelings of joy or sadness since it would only affect their meridians if one forces them down and pressures oneself to stabilize one's mind. And this would in turn mean that one would overreach themselves, and their condition would turn for the worse as a result. However, Jun Moxie was very clear about this. He was anxious about the extent of his present advancements. But he didn't operate the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune in a hurry to examine himself. Instead, he first dealt with the issue just mentioned. And the young Master Jun acted in a crazed manner and gave vent to his excitement as much as he could. The physiological condition of the body wouldn't come into effect since there would be a sense of, I've already vented, to provide a subtle mental nudge once a person unburdens themselves. And this would greatly reduce the chance of a devil's bite during the practice. What problems will I have if I dispel the chance of a devil's bite? Therefore, Jun Moxie's practice proceeded without a hitch. And the entirety his aura cycled within his body at extreme speeds. Then, Jun Moxie started to inspect his own internal state of affairs. And his jaw dropped once again. Feck feck feck. A succession of cuss words exploded from his mouth. Jun Moxie didn't know what else to do or say. His mind was a confused mess, and only those extremely vulgar words were left in it. Truly. Ah, he shouted fiercely at first. And then he extended his hands and started to beat his chest. Jun Moxie's actions made him seem like a black bear that was showing off his strength. It could be said that the young Master Jun was ecstatic to the extreme. No one could see what was inside the Hongjun pagoda in any case. And no one would also know that the young Master Jun had been completely cleansed from the inside. Moreover, he didn't have a thread of clothing upon his body. The young master's body had originally been covered in clothing. But he had torn his clothes to shreds when he was going through that pain and suffering. The young Master Jun was thoroughly shocked. It was because he had found a clear and thin essence flowing inside his meridians. And this substance looked very similar to mercury. In fact, that matter seemed to have a somewhat flickering shine to it, and it was obvious that it contained a huge amount of power. His aura had been invisible, and had exhibited no particular character as it had flowed into the first level. And the aura and spiritual essence had taken on a somewhat misty appearance inside the Hongjun pagoda's second level because of the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. However, that spiritual essence and aura had disappeared, and this mysterious substance had appeared shortly after. Therefore, it was obvious that his spiritual essence had transformed. Moreover, this indicated that his essence had remained the same in quantity, but had undergone a qualitative change. This obviously meant that his Xian efficacy had undergone a substantial change. And that slender and silvery thread declared that Jun Moxie had set foot in the third level of art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. This meant that he would see another breakthrough at last. Jun Moxie got a hold of himself and concentrated as he started to cycle his Xian efficacy over his body again. The speed became increasingly fast. and the thin silver string started to make a noisy sound. It seemed to be vibrating since it was giving off a buzzing noise. First cycle, second cycle, and then, he was at the peak of the second level. Jun Moxie proceeded further, and he clearly felt that the layers ahead were becoming as frail as paper. He felt that he would only need to exert himself a bit, and he would get through. And it would be an entirely new realm when the time would come. Jun Moxie slowly breathed in and out as he stabilized his mental state. And then, he gently increased the speed as he impacted the bottleneck. He didn't wish to congeal his full strength and break through because he believed that success would only come under the right conditions. And that moment had presented itself since the conditions were ripe. So, trying to be too fast wouldn't be good. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't feel anxious. Moreover, he didn't dare to take the risks again. Who knew what harmful side effects may be unleashed if he broke through by force? Perhaps there would be a violent and harmful devil's bite, like he had seen in the case of the flame of primal chaos. It had to be said that the devil's bite from the flame of primal chaos had made Jun Moxie very cautious. Jun Moxie eventually started to feel that the gate to the next level was being pushed back due to the impact of his strength. After that, it became a bit thinner, and eventually became transparent. Finally, a very faint sighing-like sound arose. And a very small opening appeared at the gate to the third level. It seemed like a balloon had come into contact with a very small needle. But it finally burst. Jun Moxie still didn't advance at a rapid pace. He pushed forward slowly as he gently poured in his aura, and cautiously proceeded forward. And, finally, bang! Jun Moxie felt the explosive sound inside his mind, and felt like the world had turned upside down. He felt the entire Hongjun pagoda revolve for a moment. The furnace of good fortune flickered on his left at one time, and then on his right. And then, he found that it was placed above his head. The steadily burning flame of primal chaos also moved about. Jun Moxie remained unmoved by this. And he stabilized his mind once again as he moved forward in a firm manner. And then, at last, there was an unexpected impact of a massive force. This force was extremely powerful, and had crossed Jun Moxie's expectations by far. Jun Moxie felt that his meridians had suddenly swollen. And then, an illusionary image appeared in front of him without any warning. The illusionary image slowly floated downwards, and became stable as it got down. Then, it turned into a real doorway. Jun Moxie stood in front of that doorway. He felt that the spiritual influence within his body could shake mountains and call tsunamis with a cheerful voice. Jun Moxie's heart was very moved after he examined his spiritual influence. Then, he finally initiated the third layer of the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. And he opened the third level of the Hongjun pagoda after that. Jun Moxie smiled as he recalled the pain he had suffered a while ago. It had seemed like the pain from the entire 18 levels of hell at once. Only a real man can endure the most devastating of pain and hardships. These aren't merely empty words. It was only natural that someone with Jun Moxie's persistence would be able to endure that kind of pain and suffering. But not everyone could endure it. In fact, most people wouldn't be able to endure it. They would be terror-stricken, and would never be able to evade the dark of their fates. So, it was extremely fortunate that Jun Moxie had survived it. He had met a number of people in his 2 lives. But the number of people who could have survived that ordeal could be counted on 5 fingers. And that was enough to make him proud. He had the persistence of an evil monarch. And He had the crazed endurance of an evil monarch. But that was also his greatest asset. An indistinct and vague chant suddenly appeared in Jun Moxie's mind. There's a road to the sky above, but it takes an age to set upon it. Raise your head and look at the beautiful trees. A heart with a mountain of spirit is only a lake at the foot of an immortal. One can take this road after 9 transformations of the soul. The aura in the 3rd level of the Hongjun Pagoda spanned heaven and earth. He had finally broken through another barrier. A bright light had flashed at the time he had broken into the 2nd layer of the Hongjun Pagoda. And his cultivation had broken past the first 9 levels of Xian Qi cultivation when that had happened. But he had jumped from the Jade Xian peak to the initial level of Sky Xian this time. And this breakthrough was equal to advancing another one of the 4 barriers of Xian Qi cultivation. This was astonishing. In fact, it was terrifying. They were only 4 major barriers in count. However, the progress was exponential with each stage. Everyone knows that the time required to break through to the succeeding levels increases as a person's Xian cultivation reaches a higher state. Moreover, the arrangement of levels is very clearly organized. Therefore, a person would have to face 4 major difficulties or barriers in their journey. The first would be to break the 9 barriers. This entails to the first 9 levels of Xian Qi cultivation. And this is what differentiates a Xian Qi practitioner from an ordinary person. The second was the Jade Xian entrance barrier. This was important because it was the true starting point for the future. Jade Xian was certainly not a very high level. However, a person would never be able to break into the Jade Xian realm if they didn't possess sufficient innate talent for Xian cultivation. So, to be able to reach the Jade Xian realm at an early age was indicative that the said person possessed excellent innate talent. And this obviously dictated that they had a high probability of achieving greater things in the future. For example, Bailey Luo Yun was merely a Jade Xian expert. But this was the main reason why countless high-level experts were surprised at the sight of him. And the third major breakthrough would happen when a person would advance from the Earth Xian peak to Sky Xian. There was a massive difference in the strength of these 2 levels. In fact, the difference in power after the breakthrough was so great that it couldn't be calculated. It required a lot of effort and time besides mere innate talent to become a Sky Xian expert. It was said that reaching that level was somewhat like going from level 1 Xian realm to Earth Xian peak. As for the 4th breakthrough, that's to the realm of Spirit Xian. Any Sky Xian expert who has cultivated at that level for 30 years or more could reach the Spirit Xian realm. However, most Sky Xian experts get very old by the time they reach the Sky Xian realm. Therefore, another 30 years of cultivation is often beyond their imagination by that time. However, a person would reach an entirely different level of strength once they had ascended to the Spirit Xian realm. In fact, most people couldn't even dream of touching them. And that was because they had already cleared all the 4 major barriers. To sum matter up, the young master had suffered greatly. In fact, it would be an exaggeration to say that he had barely managed to survive that painful ordeal. However, the rewards he had received in return were also quite generous. This advancement was a huge leap. And his advance had been unpreceded as far as the history was concerned. In fact, one could reckon that this feat would probably never be achieved again. Jun Moxie silently went over the mantra he had just received. Then, he recalled the mantras he had received at the previous 2 levels. He recalled the mantra at the 1st level: the soul that undergoes 9 refinements won't fall into hell. The 2nd level had proclaimed, 9 loyal transformations will stabilize the soul. Then, another mantra had appeared at the 3rd level as expected. And it had said, one can take this road after 9 transformations of the soul. These 3 mantras had one thing in common: the words 9 and soul. Jun Moxie nodded in silence and thought. Is there a deeper meaning to this? The number 9 seemed too important. The Hong Jun Pagoda had 9 layers. The art of unlocking the heavens fortune had 9 levels as well. Moreover, one would encounter a mantra every time they would advance through each one of these levels. And each of these mantras had the number 9 in them. He hadn't reached the top level yet. But Jun Moxie was certain that he would encounter the number 9 in each of the mantras as he'd advance further. What could this be hinting at? Jun Moxie recalled his previous 2 advancements. His soul had neither undergone 9 refinements, nor had it witnessed 9 transformations. My soul hasn't seen 9 of anything. But why did I still advance? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 373. What kind of a medicine is it? Jun Moxie pondered for a while, but could not understand anything. So he decided to let go of it. The young master then felt his aura surge rapidly. His aura had become extremely lively. This also made Jun Moxie's spirits rise ceaselessly. I'm no longer a weak shrimp from this moment onwards. The strength of a Sky Xian initial level expert isn't exactly formidable when compared to the top experts of the mainland and the forest. However, it's powerful and unreachable when compared to the usual Xian experts. Moreover, I have many other methods to surpass the hierarchies. Now, I can act openly and freely with this strength. I can deal with matters the way I want to. I don't need to rely on my mysterious identity and the enormously imposing power of the Hong Jun Pagoda like I previously used to. After all, a clenched fist is the absolute argument. I do like that high-profile feel, but it's not my real strength at the end of the day. What would happen if my strength is able to reach that realm someday? There was a faint yet hopeful look in Jun Moxie's eyes. The art of unlocking the heavens fortune had brought about so many nice surprises. What would it bring next? He still remembered how he used to watch those fictional martial arts shows on the television in his previous lives. It had experts cutting down small mountains with a mere push of their palms, while their swords could behead several hundred people at once. He used to watch those shows with dull enthusiasm at the time. In fact, he used to feel that it was pure nonsense. Where does such abnormal martial art exist in the human world? I am the king of assassins. And even I can't accomplish such feats. So, how can someone else? However, he had seen Venerable Mei in action. He had seen Li Jutian, Lei Baoyu, and Buquang Feng. He had even seen many of the Xian beast kings. Cutting down a small hill with a push of their palm was nothing for them. They could perhaps flatten a huge mountain if they wanted. This wasn't fiction. He had witnessed this on his own. So, what could be considered as impossible? Then, Jun Moxie smiled as he mocked himself, and thought that every world has its own limits. He put that chaotic train of thoughts aside, and took a step forward to go in. And that step forward brought him to the 3rd level of the Hong Jun Pagoda. Would I get a mysterious gift here as well? The 1st level had the art of unlocking the heavens fortune. The 2nd level had the flame of primal chaos, the furnace of good fortune, and the yin-yang escape technique. So, the 3rd level would have. What nice surprise would be waiting for me? Jun Moxie felt heavy the moment he stepped in. In fact, he felt an unfeigned heavy sensation. It was like a treasured blade had cut across his face with a uniquely cold chop. It felt as if his body had been chopped by a divine weapon, and had been dissected thereof. A wisp of a golden strand floated as Jun Moxie entered through. Then, it seemed like thousands of ghosts had suddenly found a host. They seemingly jeered as they rushed with lightning speed. They flew forward without a halt, and entered Jun Moxie's forehead from the space between his eyebrows. Another wisp of light, this time a brilliant and shining green light, approached floating quietly, and entered Jun Moxie's head in a similar fashion. Jun Moxie's entire body started to feel very exuberant. And then, a burst of killing intention arose, and rapidly integrated with his existing murderous aura. After that, two messages appeared in his head. The first message was, turn ordinary metals into wonderful gold. Obliterate everything into nothingness. This is the power that controls gold amongst the 5 elements. The second message was, change occurs at a moment's notice. But it covers the heavens and earth. This is the power that controls wood amongst the 5 elements. The power of gold? The power of wood? What's this? Jun Moxie's head felt foggy with confusion. What do these 2 lines mean? Wasn't it quite simple when I had received the yin-yang escape? But this is very strange. However, the aura from the pagoda suddenly started to enter Jun Moxie when he was pondering in his confusion. And it filled him to the brim within a moment. It revolved inside his body, and Jun Moxie realized that this power and the strength within his body were completely different. It appears to be somewhat special. Is this another special ability like the yin-yang escape? Jun Moxie continued to circulate that power for a moment, and suddenly formed an understanding of it. This was because his aura had become very lively and many times stronger when compared to the time before he had circulated this new aura. In fact, it felt as majestic and powerful as a massive river. His mind was set into motion, and his mental strength erupted like a hurricane. Jun Moxie had instantly reached an understanding. This was a mental attack. This force could encompass the mind. He closed his eyes, and calmly digested it all. And then, Jun Moxie's eyes flickered bright as he opened them. I will take on the entire world by merely raising eyebrows, and I will decide the outcome with a wave of my hand. I possess a genuine combat advantage now. Inside Southern Heaven City, Debauchee was subconsciously pacing back and forth inside her tent. Her good-looking face seemed dark as she gnashed her teeth and talked to herself. I've had my eyes on him for a long time. Brother Moxie is mine. I found him first. So, why would I cower now? Arg. So what if you're trying to use your proximity to him to your advantage? I have my own means. She then clenched her teeth, and shouted resolutely, come in. I want a few of the Donghua family's guards to come in. I have an important task for them. The guards rushed about in a hurry for a while. They looked anxious. The young lady had never issued such an order before, but they nevertheless convened quickly. She looks worried. Has a major event occurred? The vassals and men affiliated to the Donghua family abandoned whatever they were doing, and hurriedly rushed over and stood before Debauchee. Debauchee regarded the family guards in a calm manner. She acted dignified, and her graceful eyes had a solemn look as she glanced around. Then, she coughed twice, cleared her throat, and spoke. I've called everyone here because I've run into a problem with a medicinal drug I was trying to manufacture. Those men looked confused. So, they looked at each other in dismay. Since when did the young lady start researching medicines? But They replied in unison, "Young lady, you can command us to do whatever you wish, and we will obey without exception. But, will you let us test them first? You should consider that properly." There was a supercilious look on Dugu Xiaoyi's fair face. She solemnly nodded with her small head. "Listen to what I'm going to say. I've been wrapped up in studying medicinal methods of late. And I've made some big discoveries. I had just recalled something my sister had said when I was in the capital. And that has made me worried. So I've called you here to discuss it." "We don't understand what the young lady is talking about." The leader of the family's troops was a 40-year-old middle-aged man. He couldn't help but become cautious after he saw the seriousness with which Dugu Xiaoyi was speaking. The young lady had covered a lot of ground with her speech. She had first spoken about her research on medical issues. Then, she had jumped onto another topic. Could it be that the medicinal research and this other matter are related? Actually, it's nothing major. It's just that. Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes turned into beads. She couldn't find the right words. Then, she finally resolved her heart and spoke. "Several sisters have told me that there's a medicine in this world endangers us females very greatly. It possibly leaves us with lifelong regrets, and makes beautiful women suffer unhappy fates. And then, it leaves them to commit suicide out of resentment. So, I'm preparing to manufacture an antidote for it. And I plan to distribute it far and wide to all the women in the world once it's ready. The women won't need to fear this matter thereafter. And a great deed would hence be done." Dugu Xiaoyi put a lot of effort in order to seem like a dignified person who was concerned with the world at large. She had desired to put up a deadpan facial expression in order to seem serious. However, it was a pity that her face had turned red before she had even finished speaking. Everyone became pensive after they heard those words. They had somewhat guessed what Dugu Xiaoyi was attempting to convey, but they couldn't believe it. The leader of the troops then braced himself and asked with a stammer, "I don't know, what kind of a medicine is that?" What kind of medicine, that is?" Dugu Xiaoyi's powder became somewhat red as she looked embarrassed. "What kind of medicine?" The men of the family grabbed their hair in confusion. They were still apprehensive about confirming it. So, they asked carefully, "What kind of medicine is it? Please tell us its name. Young lady. You are very stupid and incorrigible." Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red as she flipped out. Then, she lowered her head and spoke in a low growl. "Aphrodisiac, that's what. Do you understand it now?" The 10 Dugu family's guards were left dumbstruck and flabbergasted. They could have never thought that they would hear their young lady speak that word. Aphrodisiac. My God. It's the biggest taboo in society. Even the hoodlums and thieves wouldn't use it. So, how did this daring little girl come up with this idea? This is frightening. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red. She pouted before she flew into a rage of humiliation and shouted, "Why are you looking at me like that? I'm doing it for the myriad of sisters around the world, the common people. So, I ask if you have it or not. And quickly hand it over to me if you do. I will study it. Then, I shall devise an antidote." What? Dark lines had stretched across everyone's forehead. That aphrodisiac thing, would any be open about it and take it out even if they have it? Wouldn't they want to save their reputation in public? And would they give it to the family's young lady even if they didn't have any honor? Forget about that man. Would even the 9th generation of his family survive if something happened to her because of the medicine? Also, you say that you need it for research, but God knows what you'll really do with it. It'll be extremely bad if you ask us to consume it so that you could personally experience the results for your research. In fact, it will be very bad for the 10 of us as well. This matter is no joke. My great aunt. Everyone had the same complaint in their hearts. As for preparing an antidote, I never knew that this thing would need any sort of an antidote. The only antidote that thing requires is a man's work. We haven't heard of any other method besides that. Even drenching oneself with cold water doesn't work. They all looked at each other in dismay. It seemed as if they were foolish ducks who had been struck by thunder, and had become demented as a result. You don't have it? The eyebrows of the eldest daughter of the Donghua family shot up. Are you not men that you don't have it? Are you not men? It had to be said that Donghua Xiaoyi had to be a very bold person to speak these words. And that boldness had left everyone cold and trembling. My mother. What is this? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 374. I want to cook rice with you, Jun Moxie. What's the reason behind a man carrying an aphrodisiac on him? What could be the possible reason behind that? We have our wives and concubines. So, that should be enough to get the thing in our pocket working. Then, there are famous brothels everywhere. And one could easily settle their physiological problems there. So, why would a man require an aphrodisiac? It can only be regarded as a tool of the vilest men. Wouldn't a man who'd pull out an aphrodisiac at this time be telling everyone that I am an extremely rogue character? Wouldn't things become crystal clear? How would that man save his honor after that? The 10 huge warriors stood with their mouths open and shoulders slumped. And they had a confused expression on their face. They didn't know how to respond to her. In fact, they looked like wooden figures. I only wish to study this so I can prepare an antidote. That's all. This act stems from benevolence. There's nothing wrong with it. Why do you have such an expression of your faces? Donghua Xiaoyi stiffened her mouth as she tried to convince them in a patient manner. Besides, I will study the aphrodisiac and form an antidote if you give me a sample of it. Then, all the women around the world wouldn't need to worry anymore. You don't know how many sisters will be grateful to you. You men will have provided a great service to the world. Everyone remained quiet as their faces turned dark. You obviously won't do anything bad. Because you don't have the skills required to do anything bad even if you wanted to. Besides, you won't gain anything from this, apart from making us look bad. Come on. Hand it over. Hand it over. Hand it over at once. Donghua Xiaoyi had a fervent expression on her face as she stretched her hand. No, young lady, the leader of the troops replied. You give it to me, and I won't tell anyone that it came from you. That should make things easier for you. Donghua Xiaoyi became even more amiable. I don't have it. I genuinely don't. Ah! The leader of the troops broke out in a cold sweat. I will be relieved of my duty the moment I return home if I give her the aphrodisiac. Moreover, there's no guarantee that someone won't torture me for it. So, I won't relent from my stance even if I'm beaten to death today. Besides, I don't even have it with me at this time. We don't have it. The 10 guards stood perfectly straight and replied in a cold and loud manner. They were very clear on this point. Moreover, they were all men of the military. So, they could suppress their desires for these rubbish things. There were still a few who couldn't. But, wouldn't the heads of such individuals be considered rotten? Feck! Donghua Xiaoyi cursed sharply. She cursed 10 more times, twisted her mouth, and slanted her eyes. Those men could have never imagined that this little girl could have cussed like that. So, none amongst you powerful men has it. The 10 men nodded like chicken pecking on rice grain. All of you will be punished since none of you have it. Someone, come here. Dugu Xiaoyi had a murderous look on her face as she said, I want you to drag these men out. And give each of them 100 heavy strikes with a military rod. Everyone was left dumbstruck by this. We don't have the aphrodisiac on us. So, does that mean that honest and good individuals have committed a sin? We're good men. In fact, we're soldiers. We're soldiers of the battlefield. Aren't we being wronged here? What kind of logic is this? Oh God! What reasoning is this? Special bodyguards entered like a pack of wolves after Dugu Xiaoyi gave that command. These men had been selected from the special team of Jun Moxie. The 10 stupidest warriors from his platoon of 250 had been assigned to look after Dugu Xiaoyi. However, they were all toughened warriors. None of them cared whether the young lady's orders were reasonable or not. And they simply followed her order and dragged her guards out in order to implement their punishment as per military law. Wait, the leader of the troops was covered in cold sweat. The others and I will be done for if these guys use those rods to give us 100 strikes for military punishment. We just need to satisfy the young lady's conditions, right? We can report this to young lady Guan Qing Han later on. And we can request her to keep a close watch over our young lady. And there won't be any accidents in that case. However, it would too unjust if we were to die over this matter. Oh. You have it now? Dugu Xiaoyi waved her hands and signaled the special guards to leave as she asked in excitement. Skinny monkey. You have some, right? I remember that you delightedly stashed some of it away when we left the Tianxiang city. Get it out, the leader of the troops gave a sharp stare to the skinniest of the 10 guards and spoke up in an unquestionable tone. That guy called Skinny Monkey blinked in a pitiful manner. The man didn't know how to respond to this situation. And he couldn't believe that his own leader would betray him in the face of a threat of this punishment by 100 military rod beatings. What are you doing? Hurry up. And take it out, the leader urged in an angry tone. He even scolded Skinny Monkey hatefully. You're a useless guy. I got this to consume for myself. I thought that this Tianfa matter wouldn't be a genuine military expedition. So, I had prepared for a relaxing return trip. Then, he looked at his leader resentfully. His face reddened as he choked with rage and embarrassment. Some people couldn't help but make a grumbling noise as they smiled. Explanations are given when one needs to conceal. And one only needs to conceal the truth. What kind of a man would keep aphrodisiac on his person? One needn't think too much to answer this question. Is this what men eat? Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes gleamed. That's excellent. That amount is barely enough. Hurry up. And hand it over. I'm anxious to research it. Skinny Monkey's face looked gloomy and ashamed. He trembled as he put his hand in his bosom and fished out a small item wrapped in paper. The soldier was handing it over. But he had some misgivings. He could clearly feel his companions looking at him with a strange expression on their faces. Skinny Monkey felt like digging a hole, jumping into it, and burying himself therein. He was indeed as good as dead. He didn't know how much money he would have to spend to shut the mouths of his companions. It would have been fine if only these guys knew about this. After all, they were all brothers. But he would have no choice but to take out a knife and slit his throat with it if they talked about it to the others. Dugu Xiaoyi realized that the man was still somewhat shy. She became impatient, jumped forward, and snatched the item away. She seemed very happy as she smiled mischievously. Then, she remembered that she had to maintain her appearance. So, she asked solemnly, "This thing, how does one use it?" Skinny Monkey's face became red. Even his neck turned a deep shade of red as he struggled to respond to that question. "You'll have to pick it with your nails. Then, you'll have to dissolve its contents in wine and drink it." Pfft. The group of men who stood behind him couldn't help but burst out laughing. They quickly put their hands over their mouth and started to cough as they choked their laughs. However, their bodies continued to jerk. And their facial muscles soon started to twist with the effort them were making. "Oh." Dugu Xiaoyi nodded in a graceful manner and inquired further in a professional tone. "And what will be the reaction? Will it have any harmful side effects on the body?" "There won't be, but the reaction, the reaction." Skinny Monkey's forehead was covered in dripping beads of sweat. He genuinely didn't know how to explain the specifics. And his face had become the color of melted wax as a result. The men who stood behind him acted in the same manner. They covered their mouths tightly with their hands and clutched their stomachs as their bodies trembled. "Oh. Got it. Got it. You don't have to explain further. All of you can leave now." Dugu Xiaoyi's face became red. She seemingly understood that her question wasn't appropriate and waved her hands. She had anyway made a wild guess. Everyone had started to leave in haste when Dugu Xiaoyi said, "Wait." Everyone immediately stopped as they heard her. "This matter is a secret. Do you understand? This is related to the happiness of millions of women. You can't tell this to anyone." Dugu Xiaoyi continued in a very dignified manner. "Especially my elder brothers. They particularly can't come to know about this. All right? Ahem. I'm worried if they consume it." "Yes. That's right, if they consume it, and given how much they eat, what might happen?" "Ha! You're afraid they'll consume this? The sons of the Dugu family don't need to consume this." Everyone's complexion became strange. Dugu Xiaoyi's brothers would have fainted after crazily spraying blood from their mouths if they had heard those words. They would have screamed. "We're normally functioning men." However, these men saw Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes go wide. "So, they mustn't come to know about this. I'll get mad if anyone tells them. And I'll swallow all of it. Did you hear or not?" "We heard you." Those men exited the tent as fast as they could. And then, they all threw themselves to the ground. After that, they burst out laughing and started to roll on the ground. In fact, those men were laughing so hard that it seemed as if they'd die before they'd come to a stop. You. Skinny Monkey was extremely angry and embarrassed. He stared wide-eyed at his leader. The skin of his cheeks trembled, but he couldn't speak any further. "Ha ha ha. This is so funny. I'll die. Skinny Monkey has been that kind of a man all along. So that's why you used to go missing whenever we would go to those brothels. Ha ha. Many young masters also consume such things. You should be proud of yourself, brother." Many clutched their bellies as they rolled on the ground. They suddenly broke into an even louder laughter as the bunch of them continued to roll on the ground. Skinny Monkey's face had turned swollen purple by now. He shuddered slightly. Then, he grabbed onto a tree trunk and started to hit his head against it ferociously. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. They all laughed for a long while. Then, the leader of the troops coughed and spoke in a solemn tone. We have laughed as much as we wanted to. Now, I request that no one leaks out today's matter to anyone else. We all know the consequences if this matter gets out. All of us would be done for. None of us would have been able to endure those 100 lashes today. So, you can imagine your fate if we receive the martial punishment for this matter. Do you understand? Everyone nodded to express that they'd keep this matter a secret. I must go and look for young lady Qing Han. I'll request her to keep a careful watch over our young lady. We mustn't have a mishap on our hands because of this. The leader of the family troops hurried away. Xiao took the item, covered the item in her handkerchief, and kept it in her chest pocket. She then looked around with a guilty look before she broke into a proud smile. Xiao felt very happy. In fact, she almost wanted to sing. She exposed her white teeth as she laughed, and bounced to the front of the mirror. The little girl then carefully inspected her teeth and muttered to herself, I have my eyes on you. Where can you run off to? Jun Moxie. This young lady will force herself upon you. And we will then cook the rice. And it'll be too late to change anything after that happens. Can you still run from me? Elder sister. Don't begrudge this little sister for not being straightforward. How will you snatch him away this time? She seemed very pleased with herself. She smiled with delight as she pulled a face. Xiao had grown up in a big family, and didn't understand such matters properly. Witnessing Jun Moxie speaking to Guan Qinghan in that regard had made her panic. So, she had come up with this strange plan. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 375. Turning ordinary iron into wonderful gold. This had come to happen because Xiao had heard someone say that a man and a woman they could never be separated once they've cooked rice. The man would then have to take responsibility of the woman. Xiao obviously had no idea about how this particular rice was cooked. Moreover, she had no idea about the effects the aphrodisiac would have. Xiao only knew that the aphrodisiac would help her with the cooking of this rice. And that's why she had created such a huge drama. Brother Moxie is mine. He's all mine. Xiao opened her luggage trunk and started to pick out some clothes. And then, she started to try on her clothes in anticipation of what clothing would be more effective in making Jun Moxie cook this delicious rice. The young Master Jun was in a cheerful mood at that time. But he was inside the Hongjun Pagoda. So, he couldn't have anticipated that a little witch had marked him for cooking rice, and was preparing the boiler pan for the same. In fact, Xiao wouldn't have needed to make so much effort if he had known about it, since he would have made the cooking preparation on his own. Moreover, the end result is always softer if the weapon is hardened by its own effort. Xiao hummed a song as she continued to look for the appropriate clothes. Then, the curtain behind her suddenly opened, and an elegant fragrance filled her tent. It was Guan Qinghan. The leader of the troops had gone looking for Guan Qinghan. He obviously hadn't dared to speak about the aphrodisiac scene. The man had only stammered that his young lady had been acting quite strangely for the past few days. And he had added that her mood seemed to be quite odd. Moreover, he had told her that he was worried that some accident might take place since she may have some illness and so on. The more he stammered, the more Guan Qinghan became worried. And she started to think that Xiao may have some strange illness. She heard him as he spoke with great difficulty, and then rushed over after he had finished. What's the matter? Little sister Xiao Yi? Are you unwell? Quickly tell your elder sister. Guan Qinghan anxiously asked the moment she came in. Those sudden questions scared Dugu Xiao Yi out of her reverie. She jumped and shouted in shock. Then, she turned around and asked in panic, "Why are you here, Sister Guan? Do you also want the medicine?" "Me? Medicine? I'm not ill. What will I do with it?" This had given Guan Qinghan the confirmation that Dugu Xiao was indeed not feeling well. Why else would she take medicine? And why would she ask me to take it too? Ah! Dugu Xiao Yi relaxed and breathed easy. Then, she patted her chest in fright. After that, the little girl asked in a tone which evidently portrayed the fears that still lingered. "I thought you had come over to contest with me from making the cooking preparations. But you haven't. Thankfully, you haven't." "Cooking? What are you preparing to cook?" Guan Qinghan called out in shock. She had an extremely concerned expression on her face. The young woman moved her hand and felt Dugu Xiao Yi's forehead. "What's wrong with you, little sister Xiao Yi? What are you talking about? Why are you being so incoherent?" "Ah, first she asked me if I want the medicine. And then, she wants to know if I'm going to stop her from making her preparations. But how can the two of us prepare medicine in this military encampment? Moreover, Dugu Xiao Yi is preparing medicine. Isn't this too strange?" "I'm fine. It's nothing. Ha ha ha, it's nothing, nothing at all, ha 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 ha." Dugu Xiao Yi gave a hollow laugh. But she looked somewhat frantic. In fact, the guilt of her conscience made her reach out and feel the item that lay wrapped inside her clothing. Then, she became determined, and slyly looked up at Guan Qinghan and stammered, "Oh, by the way, has he returned? Elder Sister Guan?" "He's not back yet." A concerned expression emerged on Guan Qinghan's face. But then, she continued in a consoling tone, "Don't worry, okay? It's nothing. He's powerful. And he has so many tricks up his sleeves. So, what could possibly happen to him? I think he'll be back in some time." Dugu Xiao Yi chuckled for a bit. She then spoke with relief. "Exactly. That guy's skill is amazing. I'm sure he won't have any mishap. I'm just waiting for him to return because I need to look for him over something." "You're waiting for him to return? What are you looking for him over?" Guan Qinghan asked. It's unlikely that Dugu Xiao Yi would be overly worried. So, isn't this too weird? The more she thought about it, the more she couldn't help getting worried. "I was waiting for him to return so that we can cook, ha ha ha, Dugu Xiao Yi almost blurt out everything. But then, she quickly changed the topic. "I'll go out and see if Little White has returned or not. I haven't seen my sweet little thing for so many days. I really miss him." Her face had reddened by the time she managed to lower it. She then picked at the hem of her jacket with her chin. She walked out of the cramped tent. She reprimanded herself as she walked. "Dugu Xiao Yi. Oh, Dugu Xiao Yi, why did you have to lose your cool like that? If the plan got leaked, what would have happened to your preemptive move if Sister Guan found out?" Guan Qinghan had secretly determined a course of action. Dugu Xiao Yi seems to have a real issue. She usually doesn't behave in this manner. She's not making sense. Her actions are strange. I will follow her closely. And I'll keep watch over her. Then, she walked out of the tent as well. It was already the noon of the third day by the time young Master Jun stopped the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune and came out of the Hongjun pagoda. He continued to ponder over something as he returned to southern Heaven City. The power of gold and power of wood seem to be very magical. It's a pity that I don't know how to exploit them. Turn ordinary metals into wonderful gold. Obliterate everything into nothingness. This would mean that I can turn normal metal into a divine weapon with the help of this power? Isn't this the only way I could obliterate everything into nothingness? However, Jun Moxie scolded himself the moment he thought of this. Could something like this even exist in this world? Won't that be tantamount to touching a normal item and turning it into gold? Isn't that something very unnatural? That's merely a divine magic technique from the legends. Pitiful young Master Jun, he didn't even know that the skills he had mastered until this point were no less than a divine magic in their own merit. They were ultra-powerful techniques. Being able to practice and cultivate to the top in a smooth manner wasn't something unprecedented in history. But the extremely rapid speed of his cultivation would leave many men to break their skulls for failing to comprehend the strangeness of it. Jun Moxie figured that it had been around 2 days since he had disappeared. So, his third uncle must have been worried. Or perhaps he wasn't. After all, his third uncle knew of his methods. But the same couldn't be said for his 3 maternal uncles. So, he couldn't tarry for even a moment. He went straight to the southern heaven city, and ran straight into Dongfang Wenjian thereafter. He was obviously admonished to great lengths. Was then sent to Jun Wuyi's tent with an armed escort. The news of Jun Moxie's return obviously became the most important one. And it was eventually passed on to Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi as well. Guan Qinghan was very relieved. In fact, it could also be said that she felt a little pleased. Dugu Xiaoyi had suddenly started to blush when she found out about his return. Her little heart had skipped a beat, and was unable to stabilize for a long while. No one could tell what that little girl was thinking. Jun Moxie dealt with the indiscriminate admonitions by Jun Wuyi. The young Master Jun's skin was obviously thicker than the city's walls. So, he smiled through the entire lecture. He disappeared like smoke after it came to an end, and escaped to his own tent. Jun Moxie sat up straight, and started to think about his newly acquired capability. Then, he took a blade that was hung in his tent, and decided to test if his new and miraculous magical power had any worth to it. Jun Moxie exhaled deeply as he held the blade. After that, he half closed his eyes, and started to move the power of gold within his body. It moved to his palms through his meridians, and then onto his fingers. Then, it was transferred into that cold and shining blade that he held in his hand. A strange transformation occurred in a blink of an eye. A faint golden light started to flicker. After that, the entire blade was illuminated by a splendid and starry sky-like reverie. The bright light flashed for a moment and disappeared without a trace. And then, a green smoke smoldered for a while. Then, it disappeared as well. Jun Moxie opened his eyes, and couldn't help but be dumbstruck as he saw what he held in his hand. My God! The half-a-man-sized broadsword in his hand had disappeared. And it had instead been replaced by a tiny toothpick-sized one. It perhaps couldn't be called a blade anymore. It was more like a needle. Moreover, it was like a needle, but it weighed 10 times the weight of a normal one. However, it was distinctly visible that this needle was in the shape of knife. And that was precisely in accordance with what Jun Moxie had wanted it to be. Jun Moxie had wanted the shape of this broadsword to be altered into a very small knife at the time he had initiated the power of gold. The only difference was that it had shrunk thousands of times in size. And that was all. Jun Moxie was between laughter and tears. He had started to believe the line, "Turn ordinary iron into wonderful gold," to be true. However, the existence of such a method was in defiance of heaven's will. Moreover, it wasn't that a piece of iron that been turned into wonderful gold. Rather, this piece of iron had been compressed to its highest strength. There was another great advantage in addition to this. This piece of metal could take any shape he desired it to take. Jun Moxie was puzzled. So, he took hold of another blade and tried to use that miraculous magic again. However, he watched the transformation process with rapt attention this time. So, he saw everything happen very clearly this time. My original guess was actually right. It unexpectedly shrunk. He had seen the golden light flicker in the air. The light had then flashed brilliantly. And it had disappeared after that. This was followed by a faint green smoke. This smoke had smelled like vomit. The blade had disappeared with the rising smoke and had been replaced by a tiny toothpick-sized pocket knife. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly at this result. He would perhaps need a mountain of refined iron if he wanted to build a proper sword which possessed the same quality that these two tiny ones did. Moreover, these two new blades were surely toothpick-sized, but they weighed several times more. Wouldn't a properly sized sword of this quality weigh hundreds of pounds? It would be a divine weapon in more than just its name. But who would be able to wield it? Jun Moxie's hands loosened, and the two toothpick-sized blades slipped through his fingers and fell down. He only heard a faint sound as an unbelievable event occurred in front of him. The willow wood table in front of him was pierced by the two tiny blades. In fact, they punched holes in it with the same ease a hot knife would pass through butter. He couldn't tell where they had gone at first. But he then heard them run through and pierce into the ground. Even the handle of the blades weren't visible above the ground anymore. Jun Moxie was left dumbstruck by this. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 376. I've come to cook. My God. Jun Moxie's eyes had become round. He hastily reached for the handles of the two tiny blades, but realized that the blade hadn't come to a stop yet. They were dug at least 2 feet inside the ground. Moreover, they were still penetrating further into the ground. This is really awesome. Jun Moxie looked at the handles of the two tiny blades. He had a look of admiration on his face. Jun Moxie clearly knew that the two blades had fallen down in a freefall state when he had loosened his grip on them. He hadn't put any force behind them at that time. However, the blades had penetrated the 5-inch wood in the same manner that a hot knife passes through butter. In fact, their movement was so effortless that it seemed as if they were piercing through the air. What's the meaning of this? What extent has the sharpness of these two blades reached? These are divine weapons, weapons which all men dream of. Wouldn't the fighting abilities of my grandfather, third uncle, and other people be upgraded to an exaggerated degree if I use this method to forge blades for them? It is simply unbelievable that a piece of weaponry can increase fighting capability to such a degree. A normal person wouldn't be able to handle the weight. But his grandfather was a Sky Xian peak expert. His third uncle was also at Sky Xian. So, they wouldn't need to expend much of their energy to lift 150 kilos of weight. They would be unfamiliar with the weapons at first, but they would get used to them after 10 days or so. Such sharpness may even be effective against the extremely tough skin of a top Xian beast king. In fact, even they wouldn't be able to compete against it. The outcome would have reversed if Lei Wubei had used these divine weapons instead of his treasured blade against the Snake King that day. Even that fight with Venerable May could have gone either way. If this dangerous weapon falls into the wrong hands. Jun Moxie smiled an extremely evil smile. There was a flash in his eyes as he thought about a number of ways he could use to deal with his enemies. He obviously felt very happy at these thoughts. This is good. This is very good. My throwing knives will become unstoppable in the true sense of the word from now on. Who in this world can contend against such a powerful and divine weapon? The answer to that was nobody. Someone could perhaps dodge it. But no one could face it and live to tell the tale. I could kill God if I meet him. I could kill Buddha if I were to come across him. Jun Moxie laughed in a mischievous manner. He was very happy at this moment. The young master suddenly realized that his body felt rather powerless. In fact, he felt as powerless as he had when the flame of primal chaos's after effect had nearly left his body paralyzed. So, he started to absorb the aura around him, and the condition of his body started to recover. Ah, there are no free meals in this world. Forging even these two tiny blades has drawn such a massive amount of my strength. However, Jun Moxie hadn't realized that he had managed to use this ability twice in succession even though he had just received it. He had managed to gather enough power to carry out the process twice without any problems. This wasn't an easy task in itself. This was very similar to the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune. One needed to go step by step to make any progress. It was as delusional as believing that one could become as obese as fatty by merely eating a lot of food. How could something like that happen so easily? Even an immortal with top-notch Xian cultivation wouldn't be able to do it. Jun Moxie's head and shoulders were covered in cold sweat. He moved his Xian efficacy and started to move around in small steps to exercise his body. Then, he bent from the waist. However, the speed of his art of unlocking the heaven's fortune had increased. So, his strength restored at a relatively quicker pace. Brother Moxie, have you returned? Are you in there? Dugu Xiaoyi's sweet voice came from the entrance. It was somewhat bashful and embarrassed. She then grabbed the entrance flap and opened it. Dugu Xiaoyi then sneakily entered with a delicate bottle of wine in her hand. Don't tell me, has the demon drawn the bow for a game? Dugu Xiaoyi was somewhat guilty and a bit annoyed. And that's because he had been gone for a very long time. He returned in the morning. Why couldn't he have returned in the evening instead? This had left Dugu Xiaoyi very disappointed since she had been preparing to cook with him. She cocked her head and pondered for a while. Then, she decided to explore his attitude before she'd make her next move. I won't cook with him if he commits to me without it. But if he makes excuses then, then we'll cook on the spot, no matter what he says. I'm already prepared for both the situations. Dugu Xiaoyi had also prepared for other contingencies along with the arrangement of this drugged wine. Daddy always says that preparation leads to success in battle. Therefore, Dugu Xiaoyi had thought of every possible method and did her best to slip away from Guan Qinghan. Then, she sneakily headed here. Ah, sister. Why are you here? Jun Moxie waved weakly. His strength had resumed to some extent. But he still seemed reluctant to move his hands and mouth. The young Master Jun had been pushed to his limit. So, he was quickly cycling his Xian efficacy to restore his strength at a rapid pace. I have to cook. No. You're asking me what I'm doing here. You had been gone for such a long time. Plus, you hadn't even told anyone about it. And then, you returned so sneakily. Don't you know how worried everyone was? Dugu Xiaoyi wasn't aware of it, but her manner of speaking carried the traces of a housewife's. The little girl was anyway very nervous at this time. Moreover, she was shocked to see that Jun Moxie was in poor health. So, she rushed over in a fright. What's happening? Why do you look so ill? Are you injured? Jun Moxie snorted and replied, It's nothing. There's no need to make a fuss. I just want some water. He recalled that he hadn't had a drop of water in the last 2 days. Moreover, he had been in the Hongjun Pagoda while he had dealt with the devil's bite of the flame of primal chaos. And it couldn't even be estimated how much he had sweated during that time. So, it wasn't very surprising that he felt very unwell. In fact, he was rather lucky that he hadn't died of dehydration by now. He was extremely excited after his breakthrough. However, he had considered the fact that he had been out for 2 days. Moreover, this area was unfamiliar to him. Plus, this territory had been gripped in the chaos of war. Therefore, it was only natural that his third uncle must have been worried. And so, he had rushed back to camp. Jun Moxie was very curious about his new capabilities. So, he finished explaining everything to his third uncle as quickly as he could have. Then, he recklessly initiated that, turning ordinary iron into wonderful gold twice in quick succession. And that consumed all the energy inside his body. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he felt extremely tired at this time. Jun Moxie smiled bitterly. It's not surprising that I feel so tired right now. I can't believe I made such a rudimentary mistake. I got carried away because everything was going in my favor. Such a careless attitude is intolerable. Jun Moxie had always been like this. He had seemed haughty on the outside, but he was very meticulous on the inside. This was especially true for his shortcomings. He would never gloss over them, and would be on the lookout for them the moment they occurred. And then, he would make sure that he would never repeat such a serious mistake. This had been one of the greatest strengths of the King of Assassins in his previous life. Caution had become a basic instinct for him given he led a life of dangerous living, where one could die anytime. Dugu Xiaoyi was burning with impatience. She turned around and placed the wine bottle on the table that was in front of Jun Moxie. Then, she went to fetch water. Jun Moxie saw the wine bottle and wondered, Is that little girl foolish? A fabulous drink is already present here. So, why would she bring water? He unscrewed the cork, and the fragrance assailed his nostrils. Jun Moxie was very thirsty. So, he didn't think much as he picked up the bottle and started drink the wine. In fact, he nearly looked skyward as he took big mouthfuls from the bottle. The bottle had obviously been inverted as a result. Jun Moxie hadn't drunk many drinks from this world. Plus, the drinks in this world didn't have any other good points apart from the fact that they had excellent smell. How could the winemakers hide the uncouth taste and smell of the wine if it weren't for the addition of those fragrances? The wine craft of this world was far behind when compared to his old one. But Jun Moxie was thirsty and empty inside. Anyway, who would think so much inside a military camp? Therefore, Jun Moxie held nothing against it in that moment. And then, he had even smelt a hint of honey in the drink. And that had made it smell better. However, he hadn't realized that Dugu Xiaoyi had added the extra honey to reduce the chances of Jun Moxie finding out that something was fishy instead of making it tastier. It was a pity that the man who had been extremely cautious in both of his lives had fallen flat in broad daylight to the trick of a little girl. Could this be considered the case of the wise man who calculates every scenario can also fail at times? Perhaps. Nature can fool any man. Jun Moxie drank the bottle clean. But he felt thirstier instead. However, the young Master Jun didn't see anything wrong with that. After all, wine wasn't used to quench thirst. It only added to the fire. The more one had it, the more they would thirst for it. And, at that moment, bang! Debauchee had just returned with a cup of water. But she saw that Jun Moxie had drunk the wine clean from the bottle. He had finished the entirety of it, and had placed it back on the table. He had done so in the blink of an eye. She got frightened since she wasn't mentally prepared for it. Therefore, that cup of water fell from her hand with a bang and smashed against the ground. The quality of the cup obviously wasn't very great. So, it shattered into fragments as it hit the ground. I still haven't determined if we should cook, but he has already drunk it. What's to be done now? What do I do now? Should I cook or not? The little girl's bright eyes opened wide as she stared blankly at Jun Moxie. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to proceed and force herself upon him. She didn't know what to make of this situation. Therefore, the little girl's eyes went dark. She was completely clueless. Jun Moxie had finished drinking the wine. His throat was still dry, but his strength had restored to a considerable extent. Well, at least his regular bodily functions didn't seem to be affected anymore. So, he was rather surprised when that little girl dropped the cup of water. But he also knew that the young lady Dugu had a rash temper. So, he wasn't very shocked at that. He stood up, walked over to her, took the water bag from behind her, and merely drank it down. He drank until it was empty as well, and put it down with a content frame of mind. He then panted and breathed out. His throat was very dry before, but his body's condition had restored to a considerable extent in the blink of an eye after having drunk that water. He then looked at Debauchee, who looked as if she had been hit by lightning. Her eyes were opened wide, her eyebrows had shot up high, and her rosy lips were slightly parted open. She looked adorable, but also a bit ridiculous. Jun Moxie touched her head with his hand, and lightly stroked it as he asked, "Why are you looking at me like that, little girl? You let the water cup fall to the ground and shatter. That can happen sometimes. But why do you look so frightened? Are you afraid that I will scold you for it?" Debauchee blinked for a bit. And then, she came back to herself. The little girl refused to acknowledge Jun Moxie as she rushed towards the desk and picked up the bottle. She shook it with the entirety of her strength, and realized that the wine bottle seemed weightless. The little girl shook the bottle very hard, but no sounds of movements were issued from within. It was evident that Jun Moxie had drunk it clean. Completely clean. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 377. I won't play. Would you? Debauchee wanted to cry but had no tears left. What do I do? There was a lot of that stuff in it. That was a lot of it. How did he drink all of it so quickly? I only wanted him to drink a little cup from it. I just wanted him to drink a little bit. Who wouldn't have thought about the occurrence of this error? An ordinary person tries to take every factor into account. But Debauchee's mental state had gone to trash. So, she had put a massive amount of the drug into that bottle of wine. Who spikes a person's drink so heavily? Other people would have shaken their heads if they had seen this happen. Forget about others. Jun Moxie would have shaken his head to no end if he had known about this. This had turned into a matter of life and death. However, the main question was, whose life and death? Dugu Xiaoyi's brain had gone completely blank at this time. What's wrong, little girl? Jun Moxie felt odd after he looked at Dugu Xiaoyi's strange expression. So, he asked her. No. Nothing. Why? Dugu Xiaoyi was rattled. She sized up Jun Moxie several times. But nothing seemed different about Jun Moxie. She felt that there was something amiss. And she wanted to assess the situation. Therefore, Dugu Xiao cautiously asked in a hopeful tone, You feel nothing? What could I feel? I'm good. I just felt a bit parched a moment ago. But I'm fine after having drunk all that. Jun Moxie felt a little mystified. He felt that he didn't understand something. There shouldn't be a matter with the amount I've gulped down in one go. There's definitely something else going on. So, he obviously felt that the little girl's unusual actions must have had some reasons to them. You're fine. You're really fine. I mean, you're not even feeling a little hot, like you're being cooked or something. Dugu Xiaoyi relaxed to some extent and asked in a scientist-like tone. The little girl had had some expectations in her heart. But she couldn't have guessed that the said development would make her feel like crying. Feel like I'm being cooked? No. Jun Moxie felt even stranger. What's wrong with this girl today? She's talking in a very strange manner. I'm not something one can eat. So, why would I be cooked? The young Master Jun then extended his hand and touched Dugu Xiaoyi's forehead. And he determined that she didn't have a fever. So, he asked, Are you unwell, little girl? You're acting very weird today. That's good. That's very good. Not having that feeling is excellent. Dugu Xiaoyi patted the pit of her stomach and breathed a long sigh of relief after she saw Jun Moxie's reaction. She was looking forward to seeing Jun Moxie getting thoroughly cooked. But she was also anxious about inciting some mishap since he ingested a large quantity of that item. However, she became extremely relaxed after Jun Moxie reacted in a normal manner. She had barely relaxed when she suddenly recalled something, and a scowl appeared across her face as a result of this realization. So, the little girl cursed inwardly. That's so despicable. That young soldier gave me a fake item. He obviously hadn't given her a fake item. The thing was that the little girl had never seen such things. So, she was unaware that such things didn't take effect immediate after they had entered one's throat. Which drug in that world would work so quickly, except for the one used by the emperors to bring about the death of an enemy? The little girl obviously didn't realize the seriousness of that matter once she saw that the young Master Jun didn't feel very different. Therefore, she left the entire topic after she had sighed for a while. Fake? What's fake? Jun Moxie sighed helplessly and rubbed his temples as he considered her words. He had vaguely understood that there was an 80% chance that the little girl was playing some scheme with him. The young master then felt his head ache as he thought about this, and said, What's wrong with you today, little woman? Why are you saying stuff which others can't understand? Can you talk properly or not? Dugu Xiaoyi looked on as Jun Moxie questioned her, but her heart was filled with the thought that she had been cheated. And she got angrier as she gave more heed to that thought. Therefore, the more she pondered over it, the more she felt cheated. So, she suddenly shouted, That's very despicable. And then, she rushed out. Her posture made it rather evident that she had rushed out in powerful fit of rage. That skinny monkey was dead the moment he gave me that medicine. Debauchee was acting on impulse. She had been looking forward to cooking the young Master Jun and fulfilling her desires thereafter. Speaking of the effect, the medicine would slowly start to show its effect after it had been ingested. Its effect wouldn't be fast in the beginning. But it'll have a huge effect later on. It obviously wouldn't have made much of a difference in the beginning when one takes Jun Moxie's physique into consideration. But it would start to flow through his blood vessels with the passage of time. And it would spread throughout his body thereafter. Then, its effect would become increasingly fierce with the passage of time, and the effect would spread rapidly throughout his body. And Jun Moxie would start to experience the effect once that time would be upon. Jun Moxie's innate aura had good resistance against most drugs. So, Debauchee's terrifying medicine wouldn't have had much of an effect on Jun Moxie if he hadn't drunk the whole thing in one go due to extreme thirst. He would have at most become excited for a moment under normal circumstances. However, the situation was different in this case. Jun Moxie had been very thirsty at that time. So, he had drunk the whole thing in a go, and had finished the entire bottle in a second. And his blood vessels had been filled with the medicine's essence as a result. Moreover, this drug was meant to increase a male's libido. It was unusual in its nature, but it couldn't be classified as a poison. So, the aura inside the Hongjun pagoda was completely helpless against it. The young Master Jun seemed to have been cooked. Who is too despicable? Tell me. I'll help you vent your anger. Jun Moxie reached out to stop Debauchee as he saw her leave. He found this amusing. His interest had been piqued by that girl as a result. You haven't said why you want to leave. You think you can leave like that? Jun Moxie wanted to know what had made Debauchee abandon her plan. They are too hateful. I. Debauchee's face had reddened since she couldn't control her rage anymore. I had planned to cook something. But they didn't give me the real thing. They're big bullies. They figured that I wouldn't understand this matter. So, they cheated me. Did they genuinely believe that it would be fine to deceive this little girl? Debauchee was eager for a fight. Her long and shapely eyebrows shot up as she spoke. Then, she instinctively felt that something was wrong. So, she immediately stopped speaking. Then, the little girl looked at Jun Moxie. She then blinked and asked in surprise, "Ha! Why is your complexion so red, Brother Moxie?" Jun Moxie felt that something was wrong as Debauchee asked this. Moreover, his body had suddenly started to feel feverish. Then, he felt a tumultuous and raging fire burst forth inside his dantian, and his eyes started to turn red. The young master then felt a volcanic eruption-like sensation in his chest. After that, he suddenly felt that an impulse had started to rise within his body. What's going on? Jun Moxie had always been an astute man. And he had experienced 2 lifetimes. So, he had already understood what that thing was. He clenched his teeth and lowered his head. He replayed everything in his mind and realized what had come to happen. Then, the young Master Jun reprimanded Debauchee from the bottom of his heart. Girl. Oh, little girl. What you did isn't good. You shouldn't have done this to me. The purity that I've conducted myself over these 2 lifetimes has been destroyed by you. He looked at Debauchee as he thought about purity. And the more he thought about it, the more his blood vessels opened. And he started to lose control. Jun Xie felt as if he was suffering the pain of fighting against the heavens. And his expression also got increasingly sinister. You, what's going on? You, don't scare me. The little girl started becoming scared. And she drew back with debilitating fear. Dugu Xiaoyi's unfathomable womanly intuition started giving her warnings of an impending crisis as she looked at Jun Xie's sinister expressions. The little girl's courage to cook fled her soul as she saw Jun Xie getting cooked. Dugu Xiaoyi thought about this strange coincidence and realized something as she looked at him. He's being cooked by the medicine I gave him. I want to go home. Jun Xie's breathing became increasingly heavy. He tried his best to control his inherent male instinct. But the more he tried to resist, the more enticing the attraction from that green-clothed young lady's fragrance became for him. The attraction was extremely hard to resist. He couldn't endure it. Controlling himself was becoming extremely difficult. You put some medicine inside that wine bottle. Jun Xie stepped forward. His nostrils were flared. And he breathed out warm air. It seemed like his nostrils were on fire. Yes. I wanted to cook rice with you. I had no other intention. Dugu Xiao looked at him in a miserable manner. And she stepped back as he advanced. The young lady looked frenetic and confused as she looked at Jun Xie's sinister expression. In fact, she was frightened enough to cry out. You wanted to cook rice with me? What does that mean? Jun Xie's mind was in chaos, but he still became startled for a subtle moment. However, he thought about it for a moment and realized its meaning. Of course, that's what cooking rice means. He couldn't help but smirk in anger. He couldn't prevent his heart from harboring further scruples. Then, the young master gnashed his teeth and mocked her. You wanted to cook rice with me, so you gave me that medicine? You thought you would just wave your hand, and I would be cooked? Do you know what the true cost of that matter is? I can see that you still haven't been cooked. You, stay away from me. Dugu Xiaoyi was trembling. In fact, her body had nearly cringed. She had already retracted her steps to the corner of the tent. So, there was no place left to retreat. This made Dugu Xiaoyi feel very aggrieved. Why? Why? He has obviously taken the medicine. So, why is he behaving like this with me? He's also come close to me, is it a good thing or not? I'm extremely afraid. I'm scared. I'm very scared. He looks so fierce. Dugu Xiaoyi's body had frozen. She felt that matching her gaze with Jun Xie's was giving her electric shocks. And this was making her even more frightened. Dugu Xiaoyi couldn't bear it anymore. She was at her limit. And so, she finally cried out, I'm sorry. Let me go. I shouldn't have messed with you. I don't want to mess with you. The little girl had genuinely come to regret her actions at this time. It had turned out like a situation where she had started a car, but couldn't stop it no matter what she did. However, that wasn't all there was to this situation. Jun Xie had been enduring a lot of pain at this time. In fact, his condition was that of an arrow which was off its bow. There was nothing the arrow could do to retrace its trajectory. And this situation was nothing like what Dugu Xiaoyi had expected it to be. Boo-hoo. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Soon, a real hand-to-hand fight had broken out inside that tent. Then, suddenly, Jun Xie. What are you doing? A sharp voice echoed. Guan Qinghan had suddenly arrived like a divine savior to rescue debauchee at that crucial moment. Ha! Jun Moxie. You, you, you despicable man. You let Xiao Yi go right this instant. Guan Qinghan shouted. Her entire face reddened as she rushed forward. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 378. Must have a clear conscience. The two people who were present inside the tent were almost intimate. One look at the scene, and it was evident that Jun Moxie was using force since debauchee wasn't willing. It was an embarrassing scene to look at. debauchee and Guan Qinghan had been sitting together some time ago. debauchee had sneakily taken out her musical pipe and had asked if Guan Qinghan would take a closer look at. The art of playing musical pipes had been one of the greatest interests of Guan Qinghan's life. And so, she had gleefully agreed, and had taken that so that she could assess it. However, Guan Qinghan hadn't begun to inspect it when debauchee suddenly clutched her stomach. And she then said that she needed to leave. She had hurriedly fled the tent after that. Guan Qinghan obviously hadn't suspected her of anything at that time. In addition, debauchee had reddened all over, and it had genuinely seemed that she was at her limit. Moreover, she had also made a strange sound. Therefore, Guan Qinghan let her go, and started to inspect the musical pipe instead. She looked through the slender hole, and tested the sound for a while. And then, she started to wait for the little girl to return. However, she didn't return in the first minute, or the second one. There was no trace of the little girl in the third or fourth minute either. So, Guan Qinghan couldn't help but become anxious. She then finally went out to look for debauchee, and asked the soldiers if they had seen the young lady Dugu. The soldiers merely pointed their fingers in the direction she had fled to. She followed their directions, and asked along. And she got to know that debauchee had gone to Jun Moxie's tent. She found this rather amusing. But she also felt another indescribable sensation in heart. I had suggested that the two of us would go together to meet that guy. But I never anticipated that debauchee would use such a trick to ditch me, and would run away to his tent alone. Jun Moxie was already there. So, there would presumably be no danger to debauchee. Therefore, Guan Qinghan had hesitated outside the entrance, and had decided to go back. However, she suddenly heard something strange at that moment. debauchee had shouted for help. This can't be good. Guan Qinghan suddenly remembered that Jun Moxie had acted like a complete debauchee until a few months back. So, she became nervous as she thought. Could it be? debauchee's shouts became increasingly shrill, and had soon turned into weeping. Therefore, Guan Qinghan finally made up her mind, and rushed in. She knew she had to rush in, but she had never expected to witness such an awkward scene inside the tent. Guan Qinghan felt her heart break, and became extremely disheartened. In fact, she became teary-eyed as she spoke. You've really disappointed me, Jun Moxie. However, it didn't matter how Guan Qinghan felt. Jun Moxie had lost his mind by now. He couldn't hear what she was saying. In fact, he wouldn't have cared or understood even if he had heard it in his present state of mind. Hurry up and save me, Sister Guan. Boo-hoo. debauchee cried as she implored. Her tear-stained face was grief-stricken, and looked very pitiful. Guan Qinghan became extremely angry. You beast! You still haven't released her, she spoke those words and rushed forward. She then started to push Jun Moxie on his side. But she couldn't move him despite having used the entirety of her strength. Debauchee somehow managed to bend her legs from underneath Jun Moxie's body. And she exerted with every ounce of force she had inside her body. And she was somehow able to push away Jun Moxie to the side with Guan Qinghan's help. What was revealed thereafter was that the translucent white skin of Debauchee's top half. In fact, it seemed as if her skin was blooming with flowers. However, the fact was that Jun Moxie had wreaked havoc on Debauchee's tender skin and had covered it with love bites. Jun Moxie was confused and muddle-headed in this moment, and couldn't use any skills because of that. Otherwise, even 10 Guan Qinghans would have been of no help. Debauchee was terrified. She felt ashamed. She used this opportunity to crawl away with difficulty. Then, she threw herself into Guan Qinghan's embrace and burst into tears. What's going on? Guan Qinghan grabbed the side of Jun Moxie's fallen robe and covered Debauchee's body with it. However, Debauchee hadn't even had the time to reply when Jun Moxie pounced at them from behind like an evil wolf. The young lady Dugu cried out in fear. She was frightened out of her wits. She wrapped the cloak tighter and tried to escape in a frantic manner. Debauchee had gotten very frightened. Jun Moxie's condition was like that of an arrow which had been shot from a bow, but had lost its target. What could the arrow do? The arrow obviously didn't realize that its original target had been replaced with a different person. Therefore, he pounced like a tiger and grabbed the new target. Guan Qinghan's delicate body shuddered as she shouted sternly, "Jun Moxie! You've gone mad. You still think I..." She hadn't finished speaking when she suddenly saw Jun Moxie's reddened face, his red eyes, and his confused expression. It was very unlike the calm and collected appearance of the past. It was evident that he had lost his sense of reason. She couldn't help but become shocked at realizing this. What's going on? Guan Qinghan was a maiden herself. But she was older than Debauchee. And her knowledge was much more profound than the little girl's. She hadn't noticed this when she had stepped in. But she had seen the anomaly now, and could guess what had happened to Jun Moxie. Aphrodisiac. Moreover, it looks like a very fierce dose. Things wouldn't have turned out like this otherwise. Guan Qinghan wanted to draw her sword to scare Jun Moxie away. But she hesitated for a moment. She was anyway a step too late. Jun Moxie pounced like a predator and caught hold of her. Then, he puckered his mouth to kiss her. Guan Qinghan was suspicious, embarrassed, and worried at that moment. She shoved and jostled with everything she had. But how could her strength compare to that of a grown man like Jun Moxie? Moreover, she could obviously see the danger Jun Moxie was in. And her heart couldn't endure the sight of that. So, she simply didn't know what she should do. Just look at Jun Moxie's current condition. He may not be able to give vent to his urges if I leave. Would he be able to bear the effect of such a strong drug? His mind might shatter, and he might even lose his life. Guan Qinghan had always carried herself in a frost-like cold manner. And she hadn't regarded Jun Moxie in a good light either. But he was her younger brother-in-law at the end of the day. And he was also the last surviving member of the Jun family's younger generation. Moreover, that image of him fiercely standing up to the world for the wrongs that had been done to her was still deeply engraved in her mind. The lonely heart of a 20-year-old woman started to throb again. This outstanding youngster has been so protective towards me. Will I just look on as he goes through such torment? Also, he might suffer some grave consequences. Jun Moxie had dared to stand against the entire world by setting himself against the Shui Han manor for my sake. He didn't shrink back even once. Shouldn't I repay the affection of his friendship? The Jun family didn't care that I didn't belong to their family. They still took action under those circumstances, and made every effort to protect me. So, how can I just look on while the sole heir of the family suffers like this from an aphrodisiac? Even my foster father Jun Xie was humiliated in 100 ways by the Shui Han manor these past few days in this southern heaven city. He was even entrapped by them. And all of that had happened because of me. He barely managed to escape with his life. But he would have died in this battle if he wasn't lucky, and if someone hadn't secretly rendered aid. All of that was for my sake. And now, Jun Moxie has been poisoned to such a degree. Can I really walk away from this? Jun Moxie has had a favorable impression of me ever since I've come to the Jun family. And he had tried to express his feelings with his debaucheries and mockeries. However, I've now come to realize that he had deliberately disguised himself like that. But why did he do that? Why did he confess at that time? Such kind of feelings are very rare to come by nowadays. Can I remain indifferent to that? Rare gems are easy to find. But a paramour is hard to come by. How could the so-called young talents of the other aristocratic families compare to Jun Moxie's heavenly genius? And I have freedom over my body now. But the tide within Guanqing Han was unexpectedly fluctuating in a crazed manner at this time. It had to be said that Jun Moxie's acts of deep friendship were a misunderstanding on Guanqing Han's part. Because this wasn't the original Jun Moxie inside that body. Jun Moxie's body was the same. But the soul inside had been exchanged with another person's. Therefore, everything related to the previous young master Jun had no relation to the current Jun Moxie. However, even the body appeared to be different at this time. It couldn't be said that Jun Moxie didn't have a certain degree of affection towards Guanqing Han. However, the cold-blooded killer's feelings were somewhat distant. In fact, they were nothing close to those of red-hot passion. Moreover, they were distant enough to negate the very thought of a marriage. The current Jun Moxie's nature was unruly and unrestrained. He was unscrupulous as well. But he would never take initiative on his own to confess his feelings. In fact, he would stay unmarried if it weren't for the women chasing him, or his grandfather forcing marriage arrangements on him. This was because the current Jun Moxie's way of thinking was that of his previous life's king of assassins. And getting married was an inconceivable luxury for an assassin. Guanqing Han was lost in her own thoughts when she was alarmed by something. And then she saw the fire of lust burning in Jun Moxie's eyes. But a tender feeling arose within her. Oh, let me use this life to repay the great kindness the Jun family has bestowed upon me. Guanqing Han quietly closed her eyes, and beautiful tears flowed down her cheeks. She had already abandoned all resistance. The little girl had been scared out of her wits, and had escaped to her own tent like a wisp of smoke. She then quickly changed her clothes, and rested a bit since she was panic-stricken. Her entire upper body felt feverish. And awful, very awful. My God. Dugu Xiao Yi patted her stomach since a sense of fear still lingered over her psyche. She recalled the fierce appearance on Jun Moxie's face. It had looked like he would have eaten her, like he would have swallowed her whole. Thank heavens for elder sister Qing Han. Ah! Elder sister Guan. Dugu Xiao Yi immediately stood up. Her beautiful eyes were open to their limits. How could I just escape and forget about elder sister Guan? Brother Mo Xia has been cooked since he took that medicine. What if he hurts elder sister Guan? How can I let elder sister suffer like that? And that too because of my sins? Dugu Xiao Yi became restless and rushed out from her tent like a tornado. Nothing mattered at that time. She used her skills and madly rushed towards Commander Jun Wuyi's tent. Jun Wuyi, Solitary Falcon, and the three Dongfang brothers were discussing the withdrawal of troops when they saw the tent flap open. Dugu Xiao Yi rushed in breathlessly. Third Uncle Jun, cuckoo. Brother Mo Xia has had an accident in his tent. Hurry up and go there. If you're late, it'll be bad for elder sister Guan. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 379. As furious as the claps of thunder. The little girl had hurried on her way and had forgotten to breathe properly in her rush. She was gasping for breath and had been barely coherent as she had spoken those words to express the urgency of the situation. Then, her tongue shot out of her open mouth, and she started to pant. She had lowered her hands to her small knees for support. Her delicate body was covered in sweat, and she was unable to stand up straight. What happened? Jun Wuyi turned pale with shock and stood up. The other four also looked at Dugu Xiao Yi with an inquisitive expression. Hurry. Go. Dugu Xiao Yi chocked and coughed as she weakly waved her hand in worry. Go! The five men flew out as that word was spoken and disappeared. Dugu Xiao Yi panted for a moment. Her hands and feet trembled as she walked after them. The little girl was very worried. How would the two of them be right now? Nothing is going to happen, right? Indeed hateful. Those guys had clearly said that eating that item wouldn't cause a problem. But why did it seem like that brother Mo Xia was unwell? It doesn't make any sense. What's the matter? My God. Jun Wuyi had fallen behind the other experts. The solitary falcon was obviously the fastest of them, and had covered more distance than the rest in a blink of an eye. Jun Wuyi and the other three hurriedly arrived outside Jun Mo Xia's tent. But they saw that the solitary falcon had an extremely strange expression on his face. Moreover, he stood there motionless. In fact, the man didn't even motion to go in or to go back. What's going on here? Then, the solitary falcon quickly blocked the way of the four men after he saw them impatiently trying to rush inside. Don't go in. Why? The four people asked at the same time. However, they didn't need solitary falcon's reply. The four men were grown-up adults. And the sounds coming from the tent were far from faint. The four of them were experienced men, and there was no way they couldn't have understood the meaning of those sounds. A dark line suddenly creased across their faces. Jun Wuyi looked up at the sun in the sky. His face reddened as he sighed. My nephew's behavior is extremely absurd. Commander Jun thought of something and shouted in a loud voice. Every man must listen to this order. You will move out and go to the training ground for a drill practice. Any man who isn't able to do this before half of the incense stick burns out will be shown no tolerance under martial law. The bugle started to blare loudly as soon as that order was given. The men had been scared out of their wits and hurried to the large ground as a result. No one dared to delay. The solitary falcon narrowed his eyes and followed the third Master Jun and the others to the trees in the distance. Then, he sat down and sighed. The Commander Jun is very smart. That order should get the boy out of his tent. But that youngster's extravagant actions aren't that big a deal at his age. Dongfang Wenqing and his brothers started to laugh. Everyone believed that Jun Moxie was only acting a bit lasciviously in the middle of the day. And that was a bit preposterous to think of it. But they couldn't think of anything else with regard to this matter. Jun Wuyi's face reddened as he looked at his nephew's tent and frowned. The sound of such a huge military activity must have been heard inside as well. Why is there no response from the tent? Military orders must be obeyed. He shouldn't. He. I would have also pretended that I hadn't heard the order if that were me in his place. Moxie is only a boy. Right. Elder brother? Dongfang Wendao spoke those vulgar words and moved his neck back to flash a mischievous smile. Perhaps you would act like that, but Moxie usually doesn't. I've always thought that there's been something strange about him. I've always felt that there has been a weird side to him. But I've never been able to understand it properly. Jun Wuyi frowned and pondered in a serious manner. Dugu Xiaoyi eventually arrived at this time. She was astonished after she looked at the strange expressions on the faces of the 5 men who stood there. After that, the little girl looked around and got extremely angry since she didn't see Guan Qinghan. Where's elder sister Guan? Dugu Xiaoyi asked in nervousness and anger. You haven't rescued her yet? Brother Moxie isn't his normal self right now. An accident might occur. Dugu Xiaoyi seemed anxious and agitated as she mumbled those words while pacing to and fro. Xiaoyi, did you say that the woman inside is Qinghan? Jun Wuyi's complexion underwent a drastic transformation in great alarm. This matter would turn into a big deal if the woman inside was indeed Guan Qinghan. He looked at the distant tent and snarled with hate. That bastard. He doesn't know any shame and does such despicable things. I will never forgive him. The bastard in question obviously wasn't Guan Qinghan. It was obviously the violently attacking Jun Moxie. However, it was too late now. How could Guan Qinghan be able to live without shame if they rushed inside to stop it in the middle? That wouldn't be rescuing Guan Qinghan, it would be more along the lines of pressuring her to commit suicide. So, they could only deal with the aftermath and hope that Guan Qinghan didn't commit suicide. Jun Wuyi felt a searing headache for a moment. He thought that it didn't matter much if Jun Moxie acted absurd or made some trouble. Who hadn't created trouble when they were young? But he had suddenly realized the seriousness of this matter. Guan Qinghan has a very cold and aloof attitude. How could she be making love with Jun Moxie in broad daylight? Didn't she say that the two of them were never that close? And Guan Qinghan would never do such a thing in broad daylight even if they had been married off. However, none of that mattered because this was happening right in front of him. But how could he explain that? It had only one explanation: Guan Qinghan was being forced. This obviously led him to believe that the mistakes had been made by Jun Moxie alone. And Jun Wuyi's hair stood up in anger as a result. This is a huge scandal. Guan Qinghan has been given freedom over her body, but this edict hasn't been announced to the world yet. This issue would obviously be seen as a case of brother-in-law and sister-in-law having immoral intimate relations if this news gets out and spreads. How can that be good for us? The Jun family has been well reputed for several decades. Won't that name be destroyed? Jun Moxie. That little beast. I must kill him. Jun Wuyi's face was becoming purple since he was unable to contain his rage. He's shamelessly ruining the family's name. He's very wretched. I have to kill him. The third Master Jun looked like a ferocious beast that had been trapped in a cage. And he kept pacing back and forth with a fierce and upset expression on his face. Breaking off Jun Moxie's legs would be too light a punishment if this goes out. It won't stop at breaking of his legs alone. This is lasciviousness to the extent of being the greatest taboo. Jun Moxie is violating a person. Moreover, the person he's doing this to is his own elder sister-in-law. Jun Wuyi could also imagine the extent to which his father would get enraged. Brother Wuyi, the matter has already reached to such a point. It could already be too late. So, we could take Moxie and make him hide with our Dongfang family if need be. And we can deal with this matter once your father's anger calms down. Dongfang Wenqing stroked his beard as he made this proposal. He seemed prepared to clean up his nephew's mess. He also understood Jun Zhantian's temperament very well. And things didn't look very optimistic. But one of the individuals involved in this matter was his own nephew. So, how could Dongfang Wenqing allow him to suffer hardships? His younger sister had already suffered enough. Exactly. Which real man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? What is the big deal about playing with a woman? How can such a trivial matter incite such hostilities? Dongfang Wendao's words had nothing to do with his nephew's situation. What are you fussing about? There's nothing strange about this. Others won't speak of this. But let me tell you something. Eldest brother used to have more than 20 concubines at one time. What came of it? There was still no scramble over that. The third Dongfang brother hadn't even finished speaking his well-intentioned words for conciliation when his eldest brother gave him a murderous scowl. You shameless thing. What crap are you talking? Dongfang Wenqing's elegant face had deformed with anger. And he looked at his third brother like he wanted to crush him. The eldest Dongfang brother clenched his fists so tight that they made cracking noises. Dongfang Wendao pulled back his neck and retreated a few steps to hide behind Dongfang Wenjian. He then continued somewhat fearlessly. What did I say? I just stated the facts. Who doesn't know about the matters with you in those days? Why get mad at something like that? Have I said something wrong? You can't say that I'm speaking crap. Everyone laughed and sneered. You evil creature. Dongfang Wenqing shouted and pounced. What's going on? What are you? Don't tell me that brother Moxie. Dugu Xiao Yi's big eyes blinked with innocence. Don't take that evil creature's name. It infuriates me. Jun Wuyi started to pant heavily in anger. Why are you cursing brother Moxie? Third uncle. Why are you cursing him like that when he has nothing to do with this matter? But you're cursing him in such an unpleasant and vulgar manner. Dugu Xiao Yi seemed embarrassed. She had somehow summoned her courage. But then, she lowered her small head again. What? He's not related to it? The 5 experts were stunned once again. He's not related to it. Dugu Xiaoyi's head was still lowered, but her voice was firm. Good heavens! How can you say that he's not related to it? What else can you say is related to it? The Dongfang brothers weren't very familiar with her, but they knew that the little girl had affections for their nephew. We reckon that she's trying to help him. You may have feelings for him. And you may wish to help him, but you can't invert right and wrong. That brat has done such an outrageous thing. And yet, this little girl still says he isn't related to it. Then, whose doing was this? The great master Solitary Falcon was even more stunned. You guys deal with this matter between these children. The third Master Jun was extremely angry. But the enraged man still managed to speak up in a very calm manner. Do you know what's happening? Xiao Yi. What's the matter here? Oh. It's true that Brother Mo Xie didn't initiate this matter. Actually, it's me. Dugu Xiao Yi's face was red. She fiddled with her clothes as her head remained lowered. She was so embarrassed that it seemed as if she would go into the ground. What's the matter? Little Xiao Yi, you explain it carefully. And you can speak slowly, you needn't worry about anything. Jun Wuyi's eyes flashed. Is it possible that this matter might have some other reasons as its cause? The third Master Jun was calm. But how could a man of his generation understand that little girl's anxieties? She was anxious and wanted to speak up. But she couldn't speak about the matter because it wasn't something she could tell this man about very easily. That day when third Uncle Jun had talked about pairing Brother Mo Xie and elder sister Guan. I had become very angry. Dugu Xiao Yi's words weren't very clear. But she felt extremely wronged as she spoke of the anger she had felt at that time. And her anger suddenly bubbled up. And her voice suddenly became very loud. I was extremely angry. Very, very angry, she said fiercely. Ah, I get that you were quite angry. Very, very angry, but how is that related to this immediate matter? Jun Wuyi was a little confused. This matter relates to Jun Mo Xie. So, why is this girl trying to take the blame? How are these two related? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 380. Courageous Little Girl. I was the first one to believe in Brother Mo Xie. And I'm obviously the first one to like Brother Mo Xie. He's mine. No one can take him from me. Dugu Xiao Yi declared that loudly in anger. In fact, she had forgotten what was happening at that time. And she had also forgotten that she was the instigator of this huge matter. Yes. He's yours. He's yours. But Jun Wuyi sweated profusely as he nodded repeatedly and tried to placate that visibly emotionally stirred-up little girl. Don't interrupt. Just listen to what I'm saying, the emotionally stirred little girl screamed those orders. This stupefied Commander Jun and shut him up. I had to take steps to prevent Brother Mo Xie from getting snatched away from me. So, Dugu Xiao Yi came back to herself as she was speaking those words. And she was somewhat embarrassed thereof. The little girl had just told them not to interrupt her, but she herself was unable to speak thereafter. Jun Wuyi, Solitary Falcon, and the three Dongfang brothers, the five experts, looked blankly at the valiant little girl while they waited for her to continue. And they could only think of one thing. The young ones will surpass us in no time. So, Dugu Xiao Yi glanced around as she stammered. She had been an angry and courageous little girl a moment ago. But she was suddenly at a loss for words and became very miserable. This sudden transformation made the eyebrows of the five experts to shoot up wildly. This is strange. So, I thought that I should cook rice with Brother Mo Xie. Then, he can't leave me, right? And no one will be able to snatch him away from me. The red-faced Dugu Xiao Yi had closed her eyes as she had shouted out her heart's desires. The five experts had seemingly been struck by thunder. And They started to sweat like waterfalls. They eventually sat down with blurry visions. But they couldn't take their eyes off this bold little girl who stood in front of them. They had been left dumbstruck. I summoned my family guards and made them bring me the aphrodisiac. Then I poured it into a wine bottle and went to look for Brother Moxie. It so happened that he was very thirsty at the time. So he drank the bottle empty. Debauchee didn't feel shy or embarrassed as she continued to speak about the matter from the start. In fact, her demeanor was quite the jaw-breaking and imposing. But Brother Moxie wasn't cooked properly and went mad instead. Then he tried to force himself on me and tried to do indecent things to me. I panicked and screamed for help. It was then that elder sister Guan arrived to save me. And I escaped. My actions may have caused harm to elder sister Guan. Boo-hoo. The 5 great experts were covered in sweat. And they had been rendered speechless. In fact, it seemed as if they had been hit by lightning. They were flabbergasted and could only stare at her blankly with their mouths opened askew and their eyes narrowed. It had been a roller coaster ride to hear about this bizarre matter from the mouth of this little girl. They had never imagined that she could be the initiator of this matter. What is going on? She wanted to cook. So she prepared for the other person to get cooked, but didn't cook at the end of it. After that, a third but disinterested party ended up doing to the cooking. She has indeed cooked an interesting dish. The 5 great experts acted at the same time and put a hand to their forehead. Their faces had been riddled with dark lines, and they had been rendered speechless. They had known that the little girl was very bold. So they had never thought of underestimating her. But they had hugely underestimated her at the end of the day. This little girl is already as tough as fierce woman. A fierce woman. It was nothing like that in reality. To slip aphrodisiac into the drink of her object of affection in order to cook rice, because she was jealous of a third party, this wasn't entirely incomprehensible. But then, she became scared and escaped. This is unheard of. It was like setting fire and running away. The great Debauchee's actions had no precedence in the entire Xian continent's history. In fact, this unsurpassed and magnificent feat was a huge piece of pioneering work. It was genuinely amazing. I'm thoroughly shocked. Do you even understand what cooking rice means, little girl? Dongfang Wendao opened his mouth and asked. His eyes were opened as wide as bells, and his eyebrows had jumped off his face. Of course I know. Cooking rice means that a man and a woman's hearts become one, and can't be separated. Debauchee pouted and stamped her foot. And she then continued in a fierce tone. And no one can take him away after that. The 5 men felt like fainting in this moment. Your ahm, medicine, what's it called? And what quantity was it? Jun Moxie swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a glimmer of hope. That medicine is called, it's called Erect 150 mg. Debauchee tilted her head and wondered. She felt somewhat annoyed. It's a very eccentric and awkward-sounding name. It's hard to pronounce it properly. I don't think I'd be able to since my memory doesn't serve me that well. What? Erect 150 mg. The 5 men sighed and shook their heads. This was one of the best special quality drugs for men. It had an extremely intense boosting effect on the libido. Moreover, it could ignite a man's S***zul drive to its greatest extent. It could even make them lose their minds. And they wouldn't stop unless they had burned out the drug's effect. The scariest thing was that this medicine was extremely potent. Only a little bit of it could be very effective. Jun Wuyi's complexion changed as he asked with trembling lips. This, ahm. Xiao Yi. Forget about the useless name of the medicine. You tell third uncle, how much of it did you put in the wine bottle? How many fingernails? How many fingernails? A strange expression emerged on the faces of the three Dongfang brothers and the solitary falcon. They hadn't expected the great general would know the correct usage. So, this development was genuinely unexpected for them. However, they were very concerned about Jun Moxie at this time. Otherwise, they would have laughed. How many fingernails? I don't know. That's difficult to guess. It was around one full packet. Duga Xiaoyi's eyes had taken a round shape as she gestured with her hands to mimic a packet. I put all of it into the win. I only wanted him to drink a cup's worth of it. But Brother Moxie was very thirsty and drank all of it in one go. He had finished the entire bottle before I could do anything. He drank it down extremely quickly. You put all of it in the wine. And he drank the entire bottle, the five men exclaimed in alarm, and looked at each other in dismay. Good heavens! This matter has genuinely gone to shit. You, little girl, you've caused trouble, you genuinely caused a big trouble. Jun Wuyi had gone into a panic. A person who'd consumed so much of that drug would explode. Then, he continued in a stern voice. Your family guards are absurd. Why would a soldier march to war with aphrodisiac in his pockets? This is very shameful behavior. And this is a violation of military discipline. Such a horrible conduct can't be forgiven. Jun Wuyi was somewhat flustered. His expression was as fierce as someone who was about to peel the skin off a rabbit or a dog. But he also looked a bit scared. Such a large amount of erect 150 milligrams would obviously create a problem. If Moxie really, dang. Then what? Can we expect to get out of this? But the possibility of that is very low. And what will happen to the Jun family? Moreover, Qing Han, she's considered the Jun family's daughter-in-law. But she's still a maiden. How can she endure that? What's to be done if she's unable to endure it, and vanishes like a falling star? Dongfang Wenjian also panicked and suggested, how about we burst in and force those two apart? That poison will be forced out if we transfer our efficacy. I wouldn't have thought of doing that unless the matter was so urgent. You're a pig. An aphrodisiac is not a poison. Poison flows within blood vessel and meridians, but can be removed. An aphrodisiac penetrates the very being. It tempts the very basic instinct of a man. How will you force that out? Jun Wuyi had seemingly lost his mind as he showered down curses. And tell me again, what will we do about Qing Han if we burst in? What will we do about Moxie? You pig head. Urgent matter, bullshit urgent. Jun Wuyi had been driven mad. However, Dongfang Wenjian knew that Jun Wuyi hadn't meant it. He understood the commander's frame of mind, because his own was the same. Solitary Falcon thought for a bit, and tried to calm things down. Everyone calm down. There's no need to muddle the situation. We can't forget that Jun Moxie has inherited his master's amazing fighting and medical skills. And those skills are very miraculous. So, we needn't worry since his master has taught him those amazing things. Moxie will be fine. Jun Moxie's temper slowly began to stabilize. However, his eyes were brimming with worry as he said, I hope so. The three Dongfang brothers became curious and asked, "Mo Xie's master? Who is that? Since when did Mo Xie have a master?" The three of them had become extremely curious about the words Mo Xie's master, since these words seemed to carry a miraculous effect. In fact, these words had even made the half-crazed Jun Xie to calm down. But why? You've already seen his master. He's a genuinely skilled man. Solitary Falcon's face was brimming with admiration. And the three brothers could tell that this sense of admiration came from the depths of his heart and wasn't fake. "We've seen him. Who is he? How come such an expert didn't leave an impression on us?" The three Dongfang brothers were somewhat startled. It had to be mentioned that the Solitary Falcon was one of the Great Eight Masters. Moreover, he was also one of the most arrogant ones. But he still harbored such respect for that person. Dongfang Wenqing had never anticipated that someone in this world could have been worthy of this feat. Mo Xie's master is the mysterious black-clothed man who got rid of Li Ju Tian, the Solitary Falcon replied with a tone of acclaim. The other four became speechless. Even Jun Xie hadn't known that the aforementioned extremely formidable and mysterious black-clothed expert was Jun Mo Xie's master. No wonder such a senior had showed up to rescue the Jun family. The biggest question in the third Master Jun's mind had finally been answered. That mysterious black-clad expert is Mo Xie's master. Dugu Xiaoyi was left somewhat puzzled as she saw everyone's reaction. "So," she asked, "what's happening, everyone? Was the medicine bad?" "Bad?" Jun Xie looked at Dugu Xiaoyi weakly. She had a puzzled expression on her face. In fact, the adorable and silly little girl was still looking to Jun Xie to guide her on the right path. "The medicine wasn't good? That's not the point here, little girl. The crucial point is that your cooking rice idea didn't go as planned." Dongfang Wendao smiled and continued. "You wanted to cook the rice. You put the rice in the pot, and then you added water to it. After that, you put it to boil. However, you refused to have the rice when once it was ready. And you left. Your rice is cooked, but it's being consumed by someone else. So, your laborious efforts are being taken advantage of by others." Dongfang Wendao sighed. "It's like you worked hard to find the right clothes, but someone else wore them to their marriage. Good luck, ah." Everyone's hearts had settled down once they had learned about the identity of Jun Mo Xie's master. In fact, Dongfang Wendao was now in the mood to joke with the little girl. "What? Who is eating it?" Dugu Xiaoyi became very infuriated. "I cooked that rice." This story will be continued to chapter 381. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.